Which running backs are skyrocketing up our draft rankings for 2023? We're about to tell you. Welcome back to the Fantasy Endgame. I'm Pierre. He's Chris. We're here to break down some early running back risers. How high are they? Well, let's break it down one by one and start with the guy who was, borderline league winner, at least league winning helper, Tyler Allgeier of the Falcons in his rookie year, and down the stretch, he really came through. The last 4 games, he averaged 107 yards per game on the ground and scored a couple times. Chris, do you think he can kind of just take a stranglehold of that starting job next year and really be a dependable force from the beginning?
I do, if he survives free agency and the draft. Because remember, he was, a 4th round draft pick at running back. We saw it with a guy like Michael Carter last year, who looked great when he got the chance. But then they went out and drafted Breece Hall, and that kind of ended Michael Carter's run there. I feel like Tyler Allgeier is built more to be a workhorse running back than Michael Carter is. And I feel like the Falcons viewed him that way, at least after the bye. When these rookies get this bump after the bye, we saw it in Atlanta, and who is he really competing with at the moment? Cordero Patterson, who's going to be well over 30 years old, really kind of got phased out down the stretch here. And Atlanta has one of the best offensive lines. You got to think Arthur Smith will be back. As frustrating as it was as fantasy players to have Arthur Smith as a coach, the team and the offense actually performed better than expectations, so no reason to think he won't be back again. This is going to be a run-heavy offense, a great offensive line, but assuming he survives the draft, meaning they don't take a running back with really high draft capital, I think Tyler Allgeier is in a great spot to just build off what he did here in 2022 and have an even bigger year in 2023.
I feel really good about the situation and the team context here because he's got what you really want already for a running back. He's got one of the best offensive lines in the league already, and that's why Atlanta was able to run the ball. You know, they want to run the ball because it's Arthur Smith. But look, whoever they have at quarterback next year, it's either going to be Ritter in year 2, and they're not going to let him just be a gunslinger, or it's going to be a rookie. In which case, I still feel like they're going to run the ball a lot behind that really good offensive line. And what you really hope is that they invest in their defense, which was actually the problem, the main problem in Atlanta. So if they can shore up that defense, that means even better news for Allgeier because they'll have less negative game script. Feel pretty good about where he is. I feel like he might actually be underdrafted even more so next year based on expectation. All right, another guy who is climbing up our board at running back. He was a stud for most of the year, and that is Kenneth Walker, another rookie. So can he make a leap in year 2? Because he was already pretty good as it was.
Yeah, I don't see why not. Led all rookies in rushing, went over 1,000 yards, and he didn't start until week 6. He looks all the part of what you want in an elite fantasy running back. Maybe the one knock could be he's not going to catch a ton of passes, but he's got so much touchdown upside, so much big play upside. And one impressive thing about the Seahawks, other than Geno Smith becoming a good quarterback, was how good this defense was in 2022. I think myself and a lot of people expected this defense to be really bad. They had a lot of turnover. They had a lot of young rookies on this defense, and they really stepped up and played well. And that's good for the running back. You talked about it with Allgeier. Better defense means better game script, means more carries for the running back. You got to feel great about Kenneth Walker next year. To me, he's at least a top 10 running back in all formats, and he might even push into the top 5 as we get later in the draft process.
I've loved Walker always from the jump. Seattle didn't look like a great landing spot for him. I don't think it really matters. Look, that offensive line actually did overachieve a little bit. People didn't expect those rookies that they have come in at the O-line to perform as well as they did. That now looks like a pretty solid group there. It's interesting. We'll see what happens there with them because they have a very nice draft pick courtesy of the Broncos. So being that it's early enough, do they go and try to get a quarterback of the future? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on that. But look, you kind of hope that they just stick with Geno because Geno was solid, pretty good as far as a guy who can manage the game, not make too many mistakes, but he's not somebody who they're going to depend on. And that way, Kenneth Walker stays the focal point of the offense. Look, I think that he is a guy who almost doesn't really need to have this great situation behind him. He's a guy who has explosive speed. He can make defenders miss at the drop of a dime. I don't really care who else is in the backfield, who's at quarterback. Kenneth Walker is a guy I'm always going to be high on. could we see Rhamondre Stevenson used even more? A lot of people did not expect him to be the force he was, especially as a pass catcher, but there it is. And now Damien Harris might be gone. Can we actually trust a Patriots running back, Bill Belichick offense, as a workhorse?
I think we can. Damien Harris hitting free agency. The Patriots don't usually bring back running backs once they enter free agency. They like those guys on those rookie deals, as you should as an NFL team. And Rhamondre is still on his rookie deal. He looked great. I know down the stretch he didn't really deliver as much, but I think that had more to do with that ankle injury. I don't think he was 100%. Even here in week 18 when they got eliminated, I think he had 5 or 6 catches. That was the thing. Rhamondre Stevenson becoming this pass-catching monster was not something I foresaw in his range of outcomes. I know there was talk in training camp that maybe he could get used more in the passing game, but to get used this much more, I don't think anybody saw that. I really do think they roll into next season with Rhamondre Stevenson as the guy. He looks good. He looks good running the ball. He developed that pass-catching ability. I think you got to feel really good about Rhamondre Stevenson going into next season.
As far as this situation, look, I'll say the Patriots fans especially is waiting for Matt Patricia to get the axe as offensive coordinator there, because I don't think it's doing anybody favors. But no matter who it is or who they bring in, it's going to be a run-first offense. It's going to still feature a lot of passes to the running back. That's just how Belichick rolls. It's Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi, or who knows who they bring in potentially. Talking about maybe bringing Jimmy Garoppolo back. No matter what, Rhamondre is going to get a ton of touches, and that's always what I'm going to shoot for in fantasy. He's shown that he can handle load. He gets used at the goal line. He gets used as a receiver. He gets used between the tackles. I mean, what else could you ask for? And then for our last running back, that is skyrocketing. I'm glad to announce that Cam Akers is back. Now, some people say back from what? Like, he was never really a stud in fantasy. He had a few good games. He had some moments. He's been hurt a lot. Okay, this is true. But I think he's back to the level that we hoped he could get to. Tell me why you think Cam Akers is a guy worth taking the risk on next year.
Number one, we saw down the stretch here, he became the guy on the Rams getting all the work in this backfield, basically. And he actually started to look better. He started to look like a productive NFL running back. You know, I don't feel quite as strongly about him as the first three we talked about, because there's a lot of uncertainty here with the Rams. Will Sean McVay be back? Doesn't sound like it. Not official, but it doesn't sound like it. We know Sean McVay loved Cam Akers. Will this offensive line get any better? Still, Cam Akers is a talented guy. If he's going to get this kind of usage, not a lot of running backs getting the kind of usage Cam Akers was getting down the stretch here. So definitely going to have to keep an eye on Cam Akers, see how all of this plays out. I mean, look, because last year he wasn't even on my board. So just the fact that he's on my board and a potential draft, pick for me in 2023 is basically skyrocketing as far as Cam Akers.
If you're a believer, we should all be a believer, because I know you were definitely worried. And I mean, look, the whole first half of the season, you were dead right. Cam Akers shouldn't have even been drafted, but everything kind of fell into place for him. The best thing that happened for Akers was Darrell Henderson getting released midseason. As soon as Henderson was cut and Akers became the starter officially again, then all of a sudden he went off. Since week 12, he averaged 4.9 yards per carry, and he scored 6 touchdowns in the final 7 games. That is what you want from an RB1, and that's what people were worried about. Is look, he was actually getting good volume early in the year. He just wasn't doing anything with it. He was one of the worst. In fact, for a while, he was at the very bottom in terms of yards per carry for running backs. I think this is still going to be a good spot as long as they shore up that offensive line. But even with a terrible offensive line last year, he still did this down the stretch. So, I'm all in on Akers next year. Now you know which running backs are skyrocketing for us. What about wide receiver? Check out this video right here and you'll find out who we are high on.